We have considered our humanness, if you want to call it that, devoid of the soul, devoid of the Creator, devoid of any consequences, devoid of heaven and hellfire, and so on. Now, when you extract all of those things away from what it means to be human, you narrow the human being down to a very sort of like entity which is driven by instinct and emotion alone. At the moment, I feel like people have abandoned their responsibility regarding their relationship with Allah. They've abandoned their responsibility in relation with other people, and maybe they're only thinking about themselves. And even then, I would argue that they might be being unjust to themselves as well.
To look at the modern world is to see a society facing a deep crisis of meaning. When we strip away the soul, the Creator, and the concept of ultimate consequences, what are we left with? We narrow the human experience down to an entity driven purely by instinct, emotion, and self-interest. In this landscape, many feel a sense of abandonment, a loss of responsibility to the divine, to others, and even to ourselves. It is within this modern predicament that the word Sharia is so frequently invoked, yet so profoundly misunderstood, reduced in the public imagination to a rigid, modern construction of static law. Its true essence is something far more vital. To understand what Sharia actually signals, we have to look at its deep linguistic roots.
The Sharia, the term actually linguistically means to the way to water. Now this is interesting because the idea of water is that water gives you life. But if we were to break it down in actuality, it means the way to guidance, right? And the idea of guidance. So a lot of people have misunderstood the Sharia to simply mean Islamic law, and that's a modern construction. But the idea of the term canopy or foundations, of which law is just one aspect, but it's about the Muslim having a sense of guidance of how to live their lives in all aspects of life. So it's not simply about a set of rules, and I think this is one of the misconceptions people have when they sometimes feel that the Sharia is a series of yeses and nos. And the Sharia is an ecosystem, and if we are to take the idea that Allah has created human beings, then there has to be a relationship between the Creator and the created being. And Allah in His generosity has not only created human beings to worship, but it's also given human beings a sense of guidance of how to be a good human being, because who would know how to be a good human being better than the one who created you? And so in that context, what Allah has facilitated for human beings is a worldview and a system of belief which gives you guidance. And Allah in His generosity hasn't abstained from giving us that guidance. And so that guidance then is not simply because this is when people look at the Sharia set of rules, and it's to help you understand how to eat, how to behave, how to be a good human being, how to be a good husband or wife, how to be a good father, how to be a good politician, how to be a good lawyer, how to be a good society, a good community, right? So in that sense, what's entrenched within the culture of Islam, and we see this because I'm a historian, is a particular level of ethics and morals that are framed within the sort of like culture of the Sharia, in which how to help human beings better live. So to have a better relationship with them and Allah, to have a sound relationship between them and themselves, and to have a good relationship between them and other people, both Muslim and non-Muslim.
This framework isn't just an abstract code of personal ethics. Historically, it served as the literal blueprint for building civilizations. Unlike the contemporary state, where citizens look entirely to centralized institutions to solve their problems, the historical application of Sharia during the Ottoman period created an entirely different social dynamic. It was a culture where the responsibility for the community rested squarely in the hands of everyday people.
And the Sharia sort of sets the framework for that. Now, historically, as an Ottoman historian, one of the things I've consistently seen is how the Sharia has then provided the sort of like fabric of how to build communities. So the idea of the Ummah starts from actually the idea of the family unit first, and then extends out to communities, societies, and then the Ummah as a whole. And that idea of that then helps you curate villages, towns, cities. So in Istanbul, we will see the fountains, the Sabil fountains, for example. There's a reason for that. It's the idea of providing water as a service for people and so on. The masjids that are built, they're built with a particular level of beautification. The idea is to provide that facility for people who want to pray in congregation. And continuously, the sort of like culture of Islam, hence the Sharia, sort of like is providing a sort of like ecosystem, as I said before, to help people function. So it's not just a set of yes and no. It's actually a lot of the Sharia sort of like, if we want to call them rulings, are forms of guidance to help encourage people to be the best version of themselves. There's many things that Muslims do in their everyday practice that are in conformity with the guidance of the Sharia. So from the way we pray, to the way we eat, to the way we conform. I guess what has happened though is on the larger scale of collective human interactions, there's an absence of that sort of like Sharia guidance. Today, there is a misconception perhaps that somehow looking at the world from a perspective in which Allah is central to the nature of human beings is, in my opinion, incorrectly sometimes viewed as being aggressive. And I'm not sure that's the case. I think the idea of the Sharia and just Muslims in general and Islam in general is to also accommodate people who are not Muslim. And Islam has done that for centuries in that sense. It's the idea of the accommodation. So yes, we can live in accordance to a good Sharia-based lifestyle. And I think if we do that, it will inspire others perhaps to understand that that is a good way of living. And if that standard becomes the general standard across the board in society, then it will start to be, you can see its influence in other spaces. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think right now in the current predicament we're in regarding Muslims and just human beings, now's a good time to be Muslim, in the sense of now's the time to show what it means to be Muslim, right? To stand up and show what it means to be Muslim in the sense of during those difficult times, that's when it's necessary to show how you are a force of good. And you being a force of good, where does that come from? What is that source itself that provides what it means to be moral and ethical and upright and good?
Ultimately, the grand historical legacies of empires and the complex ethical challenges of tomorrow distill into a single, profound reality: the rhythm of a single day, stripped of political noise and academic abstraction. Sharia is lived in the daily choices of ordinary life. But to see this clearly, we have to dismantle one final modern misconception: the idea that spiritual rituals are somehow separate from social behavior. In the Islamic tradition, a person's relationship with the Creator cannot be compartmentalized away from how they treat a neighbor, a stranger, or a colleague. True devotion isn't just practiced in a sanctuary, it is carried out into the streets.
Ibadat, worship, and akhlaq, ethics, are not distinct from one another. A person who understands the notion that they submit to Allah and that's actualized in their worship, not just as a set of rituals, but actually as a person of their being, you start to see the influence of that type of thinking in their other behaviors. And somebody who really submits to Allah Ta'ala and understands and doesn't treat the ibadat as just I pray 5 times a day or I fast in Ramadan, but rather they are a person what we call ubudiyya, a person who makes ibadah as the sum total of who they are. You'll start to notice that they start to reflect the idea that there's something greater than them and that they have a responsibility to try to make the world a better place. And people often talk to me about leadership, but I always explain to them to understand what it means to be a person of servitude. Because in the Shahada we say, وَأَشْهَدُ أَنَّ مُحَمَّدٍ عَبْدُهُ, and that's important. He's Abdullah, which means that when we understand the idea of what it means to be at service, what it means to help people, what it means to support people, and you create that ecosystem, fundamentally you start to see that everywhere, and that is really important here. And I think sometimes people are missing that fundamentally first you are at service to Allah and then to the community by and large, right? And you will see that in people. A good Muslim, you will see that in them. It manifests in them, and they will be servants of society in every shape or form. So I get it that at times people want to be leaders in society, but once they understand what it means to be a good servant, then naturally people will permit them to be leaders on their behalf.
In a world that often feels fractured and devoid of deeper connection, this path offers a striking alternative. It suggests that the solution to our modern predicament isn't found in looking upward for institutions to save us, but in looking inward and realizing that the responsibility to build a fairer, more soulful world belongs to every single one of us.
So one of the important things about the Islamic tradition, and sometimes people in the modern period have forgotten this, is that in Islam there is a responsibility on every single person. And that means that every single person internalizes the idea that they are a responsible agent. If you have an institution, the contemporary institution is, so if I go to the bank and I say, I need you to do this for me, they may be able to do it, but they'll say, I can't do it. Go, why not? Because I have to ask my boss first. You know, you'll go somewhere and you'll say, I need such and such. And they say, I can't do it. Why? Those are the rules. Even though they may know that the rules don't really work here, there should be some sort of way to work around it. But the individuals in the institutions, they absolve themselves from the responsibility. We do not want to take the responsibility here. But in Islam, what you see is that the responsibility is in every single person's hands in the whole institution. Why? From the person making chai to the person at the top, they all feel invested in this institution because it's their institution, they're working in it, and they want it to function better. And so what happens is once you start to see every human being invested in this institution, it's a more powerful way of people feeling responsible about the safekeeping and upkeeping of the institution. So even after they die, the next generation continues. And so in that sense, when we start to see like things like the waqf culture, the awqaf and so forth, in terms of the distribution of wealth, the cultures of the building of the masajids, the architecture and so forth. What you will see in the Ottoman period, for example, unlike the contemporary modern state, is people didn't go to the state for water or for electricity or for... People took responsibility and they facilitated the needs of their communities, even in moments of tensions. So if there was a problem in a society or a community, they wouldn't go to the judge straight away. First, what they would do is they would try to resolve it amongst themselves. They would get together as a community, and then the locals or the wise people, they'll talk about it and say, can we resolve this? Whereas now, people just bring out their phones and they want to film it, and so on, absolving themselves from the responsibility. There could be a violent act, people will not get involved, they'll take out their phone and they'll put it on the internet. But in the past, what you would see is this sense of duty and responsibility that exists in all segments of the community. And this is good because what it does is it alleviates the pressure on leadership to do everything. And people are capable of working together to resolve matters themselves, even matters to do with marriage. There could be, today you'd have to go to lawyers and so forth, but before, and you can see this in the Ottoman period, they would go to their parents. The two families would come together and say, how can we resolve this? And if they can resolve it, great, and if they can't, they moved on. So here what you see, the Islamic sort of like culture, what was created, and you see it strong in the Ottoman Empire, is surprisingly the ability to create a culture where every person feels responsible of the upkeeping of not just the local community, but the devlet as a whole, because they're invested in every aspect. And that sometimes is missing in the collective imagination of people today. Because when they think about the people of the past, they only read history about power. They don't read history about people, everyday people. So they don't realize that everyday people had some agency. They think everyday people did nothing, and that today we have the agency because we vote and so on. But in actuality, people are very involved. And I think Islam has provided a good foundation for that, because fundamentally, you have a responsibility regarding you and your relationship with Allah, then you have a responsibility regarding yourself, and then you have a responsibility regarding your community.